Well, Brexit shocked the world, and now the European Union is hoping that a Frexit isn't next. If far-right candidate Marine Le Pen wins this weekend's French elections, she said she may drag the country out of the euro. By contrast, her centrist rival Emmanuel Macron is far more pro-Europe. This is how their economic policies line up. Macron believes France should remain part of the European single currency, but Le Pen has promised a new national currency if she wins. He is looking to implement massive spending cuts, but an almost equally large stimulus package. Le Pen plans to cut taxes on households and increase welfare benefits for the working class. On immigration, Macron wants to keep France's doors open. Le Pen, on the other hand, wants an 80% cut in immigration quotas and taxes for companies hiring foreigners. Both candidates agree to keep the 35-hour working week. Macron wants the retirement age to stay at 62, while Le Pen promises to cut it by 2 years. And on trade, Macron is a big supporter of free trade deals, but Le Pen wants to protect French manufacturers by heavily taxing imports. So let's go to Paris now, where TRT World's editor-at-large, Craig Capitas, is joining us. Craig, thank you so much for being with us. So how is all of this playing out on the streets of France right now, with just a few days to go before the election?
Well, the freshest numbers, it's Macron over Le Pen, 60-40. But let's look beyond them. 50% of people polled here in France say that Macron should protect France from foreign competition. Hey, does that sound like Le Pen? 43% of those polls say protectionism creates jobs. Excuse me, is that Marine Le Pen? And 50% of those polls say they just don't like Macron. And this morning, the celebrated economist and French pinup girl, Brigitte Bardot, threw her support behind Marine Le Pen, saying that France no longer has the radiance and the majesty it once had. It's all about how big Macron can win. 60% is not enough to get rid of the thorn of the National Front.
Well, there could be surprises in store yet then, Craig. Well, Le Pen's party had dialed back their anti-Euro rhetoric going back a couple of weeks, but in her latest attack on the euro, she's described it as a dead weight and has not ruled out capital controls either. How's this going down with voters?
Well, you know, this is red meat for her base, but let's look at the other side of this coin as the same time she's doing that, Macron is pledging to reform the European Union. His most recent quote was, "Dysfunction of the EU is no longer sustainable." Excuse me, does that kind of smack of Brexit? He's also gone so far to say over the past 24 hours that if the European Union and those who run it remain the same, what follows would be a betrayal that would trigger a Frexit and create another resurgence of the National Front. So the question is, are the boys in Brussels going to pull the same trick on Macron as president of France as they did on Cameron when he went in there to try and reform the EU?
A very quick question, Craig, but with a potentially very large answer. Could France's economy survive, though, outside the euro, do we think?
Well, sure, it can survive, but how well it can sustain itself would be something that remains to be seen. It would be if France left the EU, it would be the death knell of the EU. Remember, as Europe is stuck in a screwy experiment of political economics and common fiscal policy without a legitimate central authority and no democratic accountability. Now, both Macron and Le Pen are making this argument. People will go with Macron because they believe he can fix it, but they don't like him.
All to play for on Sunday. Craig, in Paris, thank you.